Welcome again to this Bible reflection. During the week I was reading an article by a fellow called Paul Kelly, and it was a rather lengthy article, but he was lamenting how contemporary society seems to be so averse to following rules and laws. And under the misguided idea that rules and laws impede my personal realization of the individual. And so I was struck when I read today's text where Jesus says to his disciples, and says very clearly, "Don't think that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. No, I have come to fulfill them." And the law in this context is what I understand as how to live, or the aids to live, the beloved covenant that God has with us. God has initiated with us an alliance, a covenant, a pact. And how to live this out is expressed in what we call the law and the prophets that God has given us. But these laws and prophecies also evolve as we evolve. We are not the same type of people or people that Abraham was, or the Jews when they came out of slavery, or the people with whom Jesus lived. We are also evolving, and hence the rules and the laws are changing. Abraham was simply told by God to leave his city of Ur with his cattle and sheep and wives and kids, and go to Haran. And then God asked him to go again to Canaan. And God guided Abraham. But then likewise with Moses, when he saw God in the burning bush, or heard God speaking from the burning bush. And God had said to him, "Listen, go and take my people out of slavery and tell them that I am who am has sent you." There was a covenant with God there. And likewise when Moses went up the hill, or up the Mount Sinai in the desert, and there received another law, the 10 Commandments, guidelines for a people who have just come out of slavery and what God called a stiff-necked people. And then Jesus comes, and he brings a new covenant. Jesus moved us from the commandments, the 10 Commandments, to the Beatitudes. And he shows this several times. One is the text we had last Sunday, Sunday's gospel reading for the masses, was Jesus cleansed the temple of money changers and sellers of animals and birds for sacrifice. And he said, "Get out of here, because my Father's house is not a den of thieves, as you have made it, but is to be a house of prayer." And Jesus was moving from the old law to the new law. He was replacing adherence to the law as if that was something that pleased God, to a pure heart, a heart that was focused on God and his will. And so many times in Jesus' practice and teaching, we hear him say, the best commandment, the top commandment, the summary of the commandments is love God with all your heart and soul and mind and body, and love your neighbour as yourself. That's the summation of the law. And that is how to live as God's children, as God's chosen people in the world today. And so now today we have the Second Vatican Council, and we have Francis. And they have discerned and tried to express the law and the prophets for today's world, of how we are to move from adherence to a letter to a loving of God and our neighbour. And this is what I believe we have. And these are guidelines. They're not oppressive. They're not burdens. Jesus himself said, "My burden is light and my yoke is sweet." So let's embrace it. Let's embrace this invitation to love God and to love our neighbour, following the example of Jesus and the teachings of Vatican II and Pope Francis. Thanks a lot. Don't forget our YouTube channel, will you? And have a great week.